It's 2023 and you're looking to buy a house, but you're freaking out because it's the most challenging buying conditions ever seen. House prices are the most expensive they've ever been, and soaring interest rates has destroyed borrowing capacity, making it much harder to be able to borrow enough to afford a home. But there's no challenge we can't overcome. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you like hugs like my friend Pericles here, Pericles, I love you, give this video a like, and why not consider subscribing to my channel, Pericles has. Now to buying a house in 2023. First, we need to acknowledge it's going to be super tough. House prices around the globe have soared in the past 2 years, which has kept many home buyers out of the market, and it's also made house prices the most expensive they've ever been. How do we know this? Well, the median house price compared to the average wage just keeps rising and rising, which means houses are getting more and more unaffordable. And with house prices being so expensive, it's going to take much longer to be able to build up a 10 or 20% deposit. But one of the biggest shocks buyers are facing is when they go to the bank for a loan, the amount that banks are willing to lend people is significantly reduced from what you could have borrowed over the last several years. And that's because interest rates have been rocketing higher because central banks underestimated the inflation effect of pumping trillions of dollars into the economy. When interest rates were reduced to near zero following the pandemic, buyers were able to borrow massive amounts of money, which ended up artificially inflating house prices. But buyers going to the bank now can generally only borrow 70% of what they previously could borrow. So if you could previously borrow $500,000, you now might only be given $350,000, which is a huge reduction in borrowing capacity when house prices have fallen nowhere near 30%. So house prices are still here, but you can only borrow this amount. So there's absolutely no doubt it's getting tougher and tougher for home buyers. So we've established it's tough, so we're just gonna have to do it tough. Easy for you to say, Biko. Saving a $100,000 deposit for a $500,000 house is no easy feat, especially with rent soaring, cost of living out of control. But that's our challenge. So do whatever you can to build as much house deposit as possible. The bigger the house deposit, the less you need to loan, and the less you need to loan, the less risk of catastrophe. And catastrophe is when you can't pay your mortgage and have to sell no matter what. So you've built up as much home deposit as you can. It's time to get pre-approval for a loan from the bank. By getting pre-approval, you know exactly how much you're able to loan, and that will give you much more confidence when bidding on a house. Now, if you're thinking of buying a house, say in the next 6 to 12 months, there's two things you really should focus on before applying for a loan. First, reduce your living expenses. The banks will require all your bank and credit card statements so they can see exactly how much you spend. So if you can reduce your living costs, it will show the banks that your expenses are lower and they might then loan you more. So cut out all unnecessary expenses and get creative as possible. Treat your expenses like a multi-million-dollar company might treat their expenses. And when we see the likes of Amazon and Google, etc., they do everything they can to reduce their expenses, so we need to do the same. We said it's gonna be tough, so you might have to make some sacrifices. That could mean cutting out subscription services, not eating out as often, buying things secondhand, or anything else that can reduce those expenses. Start this as early as you can because the bank might want to see 6 months of your financial records. Second, we want to increase our income. This will also have a massive effect on the amount that you can borrow. So if you're looking to buy a house, can you increase your primary income source by getting a promotion, asking for a raise, maybe doing some overtime? Every little bit will count when you apply for a loan. And once you've focused on your primary source, look to start earning some additional sources of income. Just type in side hustle on the internet and you'll see stacks of ideas. Most importantly, find some ideas that work for you and suit your personality. Start by selling stuff that you no longer use and build from there. And the great thing about researching and trying out some new ways to make income is that you'll learn new skills, you'll increase your knowledge, and you might even find some great ways to make excellent sources of income. income. And that can help you buy a house, but also help you for the rest of your life. So reduce your expenses, increase your income, get pre-approval for a loan, and then you can start looking to buy a house. Now, before you start making official offers to buy a home, make sure you know all the local rules for your area. You need to know things like cooling off periods, finance clauses, building and pest inspections, deposit requirements, etc. So do your research and then start looking at some houses. When you see a house, you'll want to find out what the asking price of the seller is. Sometimes the agent will give you an exact price, or sometimes they might give you a price guide, which could be between this amount and this amount or something like that. As a buyer, it's important to remember that the seller will always be looking for the highest price that they can possibly get. So their actual asking price might be above what they'll actually accept. For example, they might have an asking price of $550,000, which they hope to get, but the seller might be happy to sell for anything above $500,000. And nearly always they'll list at the price that they want to get, just to see if they can get that higher price. So as a buyer, it's very important to know this, so you don't think that you always have to meet that asking price of the seller. There's nearly always some negotiation between the seller and the buyer, so get ready for that negotiation, because as the buyer, you want to get the best price you possibly can. And in this market where interest rates are super high, it's especially important that you get a good buy price, because that will affect the size of your mortgage and the size of your monthly repayments. When you find some houses you like, it's time to start making some offers. Now, because we've come off one of the biggest booms in real estate we've ever seen, don't be embarrassed to make offers significantly lower than the asking price. And sometimes you'll have to do that because of the amount that the bank will lend you. When you negotiate with agents, my recommendation is to be very friendly and try to build up a very professional relationship. For that reason, personally, I don't like to bag people's houses when I'm looking to buy them, which could involve pointing out all the negative features to try and get the buy price lower. I prefer to be real with the agent as to why I'd like to put in an offer, and also be real about the offer amount that I'm putting in. So you might say, I really love this home and this is the offer amount I'd like to put in. Doesn't matter if it's a lot below the asking price. If you really want a good deal, you can't get embarrassed about those things. It's exactly the same as the seller trying to get the absolute best price they can get. So because there's currently downward pressure on house prices and the globe could be heading into a recession in 2023, there could be quite a long period where you could just make lowish type offers and see what happens. What can often happen is you could make 4 offers and they all get rejected. You could make some more offers and they get rejected too, but maybe on your 8th or 9th offer, you get surprised that the sellers are willing to come down to your price or slightly above it. And that can often happen. So patience and persistence could reward you very handsomely with an excellent buy price. So if you're not in a rush, you've got nothing to lose in my opinion. Look at all the house prices you like. Make a lot of offers for prices that you'd be happy to buy at. And it's usually wise when you make an offer not to require the total amount that the bank will lend you. So if the bank says they'll lend you up to $500,000, if you make an offer that requires that full $500,000, you don't have much buffer if things go wrong. And by going wrong, I mean if you were to lose your job and not find another job for 2 or 3 months, would you be able to keep making the mortgage payments? Because the absolute worst situation is if you're forced to sell in a weak housing market, because that's when people can lose significant amounts of money. So not borrowing the absolute maximum can be very wise. Now, if you'd love to buy a house but don't think that you'd ever be able to afford one, I'd like you to consider just trying to turn those thoughts around a little, because that can make all the difference. Like I mentioned at the start, we're probably in the most challenging period ever to buy a house. But here's my biggest tip. You have to believe that you can buy a house first. And to help with that, you need to change the words that you say to yourself and to others. So if you've previously said, I'll never be able to afford a home, then guess what? You're probably right. But if you change what you say to, I will buy a house, or how could I afford to buy a house, your brain will kick into gear and creative ideas can come to you. Believe it's possible, work towards it, and then you've got a much higher chance of turning that into a reality. I'm Biko Konstantinos.